I know what you're thinking. He's crazy. Is he really recommending that we maybe have a new Berserk adaptation? Maybe not saying recommended, but I'm putting the question out there. Should Berserk get a brand new adaptation? A fourth one in total? Pretty much for this video, I want to give my thoughts on whether or not I think it's a good idea to get a new Berserk adaptation. With the most recent chapters, everyone's talking about maybe it's possible we'll get a new adaptation because now the series is continuing, there is a future. We've had 3 very interesting adaptations in Berserk's lifetime. So I kind of wanted to go through and discuss whether or not I think it's a good idea, whether I think it's a bad idea of an adaptation, but also if they were to do it regardless, what would be the best course? Let's start by narrowing down history as we know it. We have, of course, the very infamous and very much well-loved 97 anime series. Most people who I talk to, and I think it's considered in the fan base, see this as the adaptation that probably had the most positives. It emulated what people love about the series in an honest way. It captured the feel and the sound. Whenever I hear Griffith's voice, I think of Kevin Collins. Whenever I hear Guts' voice, I think of Mark Derizen. These are the voices of the characters in my mind. And I think for a lot of readers, it's the same. It's hard to distinguish these voices because not that they were the only ones we had, but also they were so prevalent. And I think it's a reason why in the English dubbing, of course, the movies, many years later, they kept the majority of the English voice actors. It's not only just the voice acting, it's the sound. Most of the music as well is going to be remembered by the fans from the 97 anime. You look at any Berserk and Chill music video, it's going to have music by Susumu Hirasawa. It's going to. And he also just laid the groundwork for the future adaptations to take inspiration from what he did. So 97 is considered a huge, impactful moment for the fan base, for the community, for the readers, and I think for the franchise in its own way. It gave the series an identity that could be more than just visual, it could be audible. Now, of course, it had its own problems. It had some cuts from the story. Certain characters were cut, certain things were cut. And, you know, that's just the way of adaptations. Not much you can do about that, but people still go back and enjoy it. Still love looking at the style. The 90s style of it is just so ingrained. And I think people really love seeing stuff like that, especially with every other old school anime. And it ages pretty well, in my opinion. I think it really ages well. And we moved on to 2010, which is a retelling of the Golden Age arc. Now, the 97 anime, of course, covered a small part of the Black Swordsman arc in literally like an episode, and then went on to the Golden Age arc. Movie trilogy, which funny enough was my first experience with Berserk in general, was watching those 3 movies. Not having any context and slowly being like, oh yeah, this is kind of cool, was something that I think did bring in a lot of new fans. But to the fan base, it was something that was still not upholding to what it was that made the series great. It just kind of retreads the same steps. Now, it did it with cool new slicker technology, CG, and it looks kind of iffy, but then with some moments that is just 2D of Guts and Griffith talking on the hill when they first meet, amazing. Like, great scenes, really well animated scenes, really well drawn out, well voiced. Again, the same English dub cast, which was amazing to do. Shows how much that they kind of do care about the people who listen in the West and other countries, of course. But regardless, it did what it set out to do. And I think the joy that people had with it is that maybe we'll finally be able to get an adaptation that goes just beyond the Golden Age. Of course, you have 97 to 2010. That's a lot of time of just having no adaptations, and the ones that you did get were just still around the exact same series of events. And then we get to the very, very well loved, not so at all hindering Berserk 2016. I'm a connoisseur of a lot of different kind of media, and when I say that when I watched this, it was so painful. I really thought about what it is to be someone who creates something and think, man, I really should make sure that whatever I do, I just don't do that, and I'll be good. No offense, of course, to the animators. Slight offense, of course, to the people who organized it. There are great videos online talking about the production of this and why it turned out the way it is. I'll link some down below. They're really good to watch. But we all know that this could have gone much better, surely. And I can't believe it went down this road. You have one of the most infamous manga of all time that has a critically acclaimed storyline and a cult fan base, and this is an adaptation that is just like, I don't even know how to describe it, put into words. We get the gist. These are our adaptations. And spruced in between there, we've got some video games, which people really like, some people don't like, some people have never even heard of. But this is the origin story of the Berserk adaptation. Now, what is the point of an adaptation? You have to ask this question before we get into the next points of whether or not they should, how would they do it. The point of an adaptation is to take a source material and give it to more people. You may think adaptations are just for fans. They're not. Adaptations are for a wider audience. Not everyone wants to read a manga. Not everyone wants to read a comic book. That's why things that are put into visual and audible mediums are much more widespread. If you were to ask someone, hey, do you want to go over to my place and listen to this audiobook, or do you want to come watch a movie? I think they'd probably choose the movie. And I'm not saying that, if you were to ask me, do you want to read a manga or go watch a movie? I'd probably go do one because it's a collective experience. But at the same time, adaptations are used to reach a wider audience. Like I said, I only learned about Berserk because of the movies. I don't know how much longer I would have gone in my life not knowing about Berserk until I watched those movies. I don't know how many people would have found Berserk without 97. I'm sure many people probably do hate Berserk because of 2016 and figured, yeah, the series sucks. So on that note, adaptations can be hindering towards an audience, but at the same time, they are not meant to be true representations of the source material. Now, you could debate that adaptations are meant to be true representations, but I think that discontinues the fact of an adaptation. An adaptation, in some sense, depending on who's making it, is just a format to create revenue on an existing property that people already love. There is a reason why studios, not in the manga industry, not even anime, want to create so many of these different adaptations. How many people do you think know more about Spider-Man because of all the fucking movies they made compared to the comics? Now, of course, you had to have that core fan base who loved Marvel comics, but at the end of the day, how many people can you name on one hand who love Spider-Man and any of them read any of the comic books? Probably zero, generally. You'd probably have to go out of 10 or 20. I'm one of those people who Spider-Man's my favorite comic book character, and for very simple reasons, and I don't really care to have any more deep reasons. Regardless, I like him as a character. Now, have I watched every single Spider-Man movie? No, but through those movies and through the TV shows is why I liked him. And even through the video game. The video game is probably my favorite representation of Spider-Man. I read a few when I got older, but I didn't read them first and be like, hey, I gotta check out this Spider guy. I saw the movie when I was a kid and I was like, that's cool. And then I later watched more. And I use Spider-Man as an example because if you look at the history of those movies being adapted, you could see it follows a similar pattern. You have the Raimi series of the first three, and then you go on to the Mark Webb series, which was the Sony ones with Andrew Garfield, ended in 2014. And it wasn't until 3 years later that Marvel finally got the rights back to try and make their own, which was with Tom Holland, which is still ongoing to this day. So they have a similar background of not necessarily rights issues, but trying to get an adaptation that fits with the fan base and the audience, but also with the story they're trying to tell. 97 is an anime that people love fondly with nostalgia. Does it follow the fan base's wants to the source material directly? Probably not, but it gets the job done with what people wanted. Spider-Man, the very first Sam Raimi movie, was something that created this whole new way of looking at superhero films to where people were going to watch and thought, wow, that's crazy that they can make this and it's actually engaging. And if you look at the landscape now for not only superhero films, but also anime adaptations, it's very, very fun, exciting, and hype-worthy when something gets an adaptation. Just look at Spy Family. It had been a manga around for a decent amount of time. As soon as it hits anime, people are talking about it straight away because people hear about it from the people who read the source material. Harimia was also a manga series that people loved to talk about. And then when I got an anime adaptation, everyone was like, what's with this new one? And people talking about how much they loved the manga. No one knew about that because the medium shifted. The medium that most people consumed was now open to this new story being told. I'm sure a lot of people are probably going to be watching Trigun for the first time with this new adaptation. You can say what you want about whether or not you're keen for it. Doesn't really matter in terms of what we're talking about, but you understand that more people are probably going to see that new adaptation and get a new experience or a new understanding of what Trigun is because they didn't watch the old one, or they weren't really old enough to watch it, or for whatever reason weren't interested in watching this old one. Adaptations are a vehicle to give across a story in a way that is more accessible to people. It's a lazier way to consume stories. It's less effort on the audience part to just sit there and let it hit you, as opposed to read, understand, look, turn page. Very different, very small amounts of effort. I'm not saying reading is a lot of effort, but you need to understand all these things that involve adaptations are part of the job. Now, should Berserk get a new one? Not in the same way, but very similar to Spider-Man, but of course one more up. Berserk has had 3 different adaptations, and a 4th adaptation is something that I think a lot of people from the fan base and community probably don't feel like we need it. Berserk is a story that's been around since '89, and since then it's had 3 adaptations. Whether you like it or not, the more that Berserk continues and more people read it, the series will get more attention. Attention equals money. Money equals more investment. An adaptation done by either the people who hold the rights or by a studio that wants the rights is probably likely to happen maybe years after the series ends. Maybe soon. I can't make that call. Now, do I think it's a good idea? I think it's never a bad idea to get people into a story, to get people invested in experiencing a new story. And sometimes you have to do that by snipping little pieces of a bonsai tree so that people can get a better look at it. I don't think you should cut everything from a source material, but imagine if you were able to watch Naruto without all the filler. I'm sure a lot of people would like that. I'm not saying Berserk has filler, very different, but at the same time, there are different ways to get a vehicle of an adaptation, a visual one, across compared to reading. Imagine if you included every single thing that happened in Harry Potter. There wouldn't be 8 movies, there would be 15 movies. If Game of Thrones wasn't a television show and was a movie series, there would be 20 movies. And they would have a lot less detail, a lot less plot, a lot less character development because of that. Instead of being 20 movies, it is 78 movies because each episode was an hour and that was an investment on the people who made the adaptation. You can argue whether or not that was a good adaptation, it's perfectly fine. Same with any of the Berserk ones. If you love 2016, 2017, I'd actually love to hear from you. You sound very interesting. But regardless, these are things that you have to understand with adaptations. If we were to get another Berserk one, there would be things that would be cut. There would be things that would be added. There would be things that would be changed. And we all know that a lot of people don't like change. Give me the same thing but different. And that's kind of a problem with, I think, change of a story. We all know, again, there are a lot of people who don't like the newest chapters. They want the same thing but different. We don't like change. We don't like seeing new things. It's not the same as it used to be. I remember the good old days back when I was young. I remember when Berserk only came out once every 3 years. You know the vibe. But is it a bad idea? I don't think so. And, who am I to stop that? Who have any of us to stop that? Sure, we've been burned before, but there's also the choice of just not watching it. There are a lot of things that I'm not going to watch. When they made a live-action Cowboy Bebop show, did I watch it? Nope. I watched the trailer on my channel and made a video, and it sucked, and I hated that I did that. And I also decided not to watch the show because I thought, why do I care? I don't. I already have the show. It's animated. I'm not going to watch it. Are you going to watch the new Yu Yu Hakusho adaptation? Nope. If they make a live-action Berserk series, definitely not going to watch that. Don't care if Japan does it and does it exactly 1-to-1, still not going to watch it. The only live-action adaptation I ever watched by Japan was the Death Note one, and I thought that was kind of funny and cool that they were able to do it. Watched the Netflix one to be a part of the meme. Still not going to watch the one by the Duffer Brothers, just not happening. So, if it's going to happen regardless, just know it's your choice not to watch it, and just be happy that you still have the series and the source material, or up to the point that you like reading it, is still there. Now, how would they do it? That is something that I think is very interesting, because very similar to Spider-Man, do we need to kill Uncle Ben again? Do we need to watch the Golden Age? Do we need to watch the Black Swordsman arc again to make sure that everyone's got the context? One of the things that people loved about Berserk 2016 is that they didn't do Golden Age, they didn't do the Black Swordsman arc, because people already had the context. They could go watch the 97, they could go watch the trilogy. So what is the best situation to do this? I'm someone of the mind where I think having a full adaptation and having something that is complete from beginning, middle, end would be ideal. It just would be, right? But at the same time, If you think about how long it takes to get an anime series out there that is seasonal and has a lot of attention behind it and takes a lot of time to make look very nice and very well done and be extremely engaging with action that is hand-drawn and not CGI animated, you're gonna be waiting a while. You'll probably get the Black Swordsman arc and maybe half the Golden Age arc, and that will probably be the first season. If you want the Black Swordsman arc in all its entirety, honestly, you might get that's half the first season. In my mind, that would probably be it, especially if you want the action to look decent and you don't want to cut scenes, if you want to faithfully adapt one-to-one. Now, of course, you could skip that and just give a recap. A lot of people did talk about how when they first started Berserk 2016, they didn't know about the history, and it kind of felt like a bit of a massive spoiler. It didn't feel like there was this real build-up and mystery as to who Guts was. And some would argue that you don't need the Black Swordsman arc. The movies didn't need him, and you kind of got a gist of who Guts was because you saw him grow up. I think a part of what's great about the story of Berserk is that when you first start reading, you don't know his backstory, you don't know who he is, and then you see his childhood, and you see who he is. Some people prefer to read the Golden Age from the beginning. It's just a writing technique that, of course, varies from taste to taste. Me personally, I think including all of it would be ideal, again. But I think maybe if we were to do a new adaptation, we should probably start from the Golden Age. Have Guts just grow up. We saw with Vinland Saga, they didn't do the time jump. I know a lot of people were burnt by that. And they added a lot of new stuff that some people argue fleshed out Thorfinn's character, some people argue kind of just detract from what made Vinland Saga Vinland Saga. These are, again, personal tastes and subjective opinions, and there's not much to be said about critiquing it because at the end of the day, animators and scriptwriters need to feel like they are doing what's best for the story they're trying to tell and not cater towards an audience just because some audience members feel like they've been invested and have been slighted. Now, criticism is also valid. There are things that can be done well. We can all look at 2016 and say, hey, the animation looks kind of choppy. I think maybe the production quality should be upped a bit, especially if you're going to adapt a very classic cult following manga that has a high reputation, not only in Japan, but across the world in a manga community. If you're a manga reader and you haven't read Berserk, you've at least heard of it. That's kind of the hype built into it, right? It's hard because if you get rid of the Black Swordsman arc, you get rid of Puck. Puck is so essential to the story, especially in the beginning of seeing how Guts is not the most moralistic man in the beginning of his story. Me personally, I think maybe just having it begin from the Golden Age as Guts was born is something that can be really subtle. You start off the story of this child sitting in the mud. It's very visually just stunning, especially on the page. To see it happen in the anime would be just so amazing, especially him growing up and seeing these moments in his childhood. The horrific moments happen in his childhood. There are a lot of great films that I've watched that start the same way. You see the horrific childhood that came from these characters and how they slowly overcome them as they get older. And you know, it could last an episode, it could last half of the episode. It depends on timing. When I'm reading it, it feels like it flies by, and some moments feel like they take a long time to get through. It doesn't feel like this moment happens in this moment. It kind of all meshes together. The anime can capture that essence of it all just seamlessly just fitting together like string going through a needle. I do think if you were to do an adaptation, getting the English dub back would be a huge W. It is just so ingrained in our minds as readers, and not just readers, the fan base in general. You just know those voices, you just know them. Those English voices, they're just so ingrained, not just Guts, like Griffith, Casca, Judo, all of them, they're just so ingrained in our minds. And you would need Susumu Hirasawa. You would need to either get him back or make sure you've gotten the rights to put his music in there. And it doesn't have to be the exact same rip and you just copy paste. You can evolve on it. If they couldn't get him, then definitely get the people from the later adaptations, because say what you will about Berserk the trilogy and Berserk 2016-2017, I.O. is still a really good song. There is some really great music in 2016-2017 that you could tell were inspired by Susumu. Susumu created the standard of what Berserk sounds like. So if you were to grab those ones and alter them, and even in the trilogy, of course, the guitar, it's really subtle. It adds a very amount of weight. It feels different. What I thought was always great about Berserk's soundscape is that it never felt like medieval music. It felt like something else, and that's something that is very hard to do. So I would say you probably should get all the help you can to make sure that you recapture that feeling. You don't want another anime adaptation that is fantasy based that just sounds like another generic sounding fantasy world. Is that a loot? Oh, it's another isekai. I think you don't want that. And those are the kind of things that I can say personally is easy to attain. It's not hard to ask someone who is a music composer, can we license the rights for this adaptation because we want to do it right, we want to do it perfect, we're going to keep going to honor it for people who worked on the manga, for the people who love reading it. These are the easy things to do. These are things that are supplementary, that add to the story. But of course, the main ones, of course, animation. The only thing I can say as a critic in terms of what not to do is personally don't do 3D animation. It is easy, it's less time consuming, and it cuts down hours and it cuts down manpower. But I think if you really want to do something that is as precious as a story like this, at least to an animator who's personally attached to it, you're gonna have to go hand-drawn. Even maybe going back to a style of 97, making it grainy, making it dirty, making it look like, hey, this isn't the nicest looking stuff, but it looks great. I think 3D animation can be used in a Berserk adaptation. Like I think 3D animation can be used for the Apostles. Sometimes it'll work better, or at least using the power of 3D animation in terms of camera work. That could be really cool. Having a 2D character move in a 3D environment, I think that's really cool. I loved it when that stuff happened back in like the Disney animation era of the Renaissance. Seeing Tarzan move around a 3D animated environment, you can't tell me that doesn't look good. That looks great. I think one of the great things that animation could do is clipping. Having Guts swing his sword so fast, not as a 3D animated character, but as a 2D one, point where in one frame it's here and another frame it's there. It just adds to the quality of the manga in terms of a frame by frame. Sword was here and now it's here, and all these people are split in half. The action would be phenomenal. But these are my thoughts. These are my thoughts on what a Berserk adaptation could do and how I think adaptations can affect our perception of a story we really like, what it is that can alter it, what it is that can affect it, and how we perceive adaptations in the long run. You guys can tell me what you think. If you think, maybe you have an idea of why the adaptation could work if they were to do a new one. I personally feel like it should be after the manga is finished. I generally don't think it's something that needs to be focused on right now. It's not something that needs to be done right this moment, not at all. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that adaptations, in a way, have any other kind of value that can bring something like a story of Berserk or other manga or anything else to the table? And if you want a Berserk adaptation, how would you want to do it? If you don't want one at all, then that's fine. Give me your reasons. I'd love to hear all of them. Anyways, guys, that's all from me. I appreciate you listening to me ramble about adaptations. I'm very happy to do it anytime. If you liked the video, I appreciate it. Also, thank you for watching all the way through. My name is Mugen. As always, have a good one.